Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism and narcissistic relationships and just toxic situations in general. My hope is that what you learn on this channel will help you understand these relationships, stop blaming yourself, maybe avoid getting into them in the first place, and ideally learn to heal from them if you've been in one or born into one. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe. The larger this community becomes, the more people who get to learn about narcissism, which is a good thing. And if you happen to like what you're hearing, please give us that thumbs up. Again, it lets more people learn about it and learn about narcissism, because the more of us that get this, the fewer enablers I hope there'll be out there. So I am going to talk about helping sort of debunk a mistake too many of us are making. More and more and more and more people are talking about narcissism again. I was talking about this, I guess, to myself because no one was listening. I've been doing this for a long time, so it's fascinating to watch how this is proliferated. TikTok, YouTube, pick a place, it's happening, Instagram. But one of the risks in a lot of people are talking about it is, I know a lot of people want to make it simple, but there's a risk in making it too simple, because I think when we make it too simple, we're not doing anyone a favor, especially somebody who's trying to survive these relationships. And in addition, a lot of criticisms get thrown at us for, no, you're trying to make this too simple. You're making it black and white. All you're doing is demonizing the narcissistic folks. All right, you're right. It is more subtle. So let's take that on in this video, because let's face it, just making it about the victim and the villain is too simple. A classic dichotomy in sort of the narcissism literature is there's a victim and there's a villain. Now, a major criticism I consistently get from people all over the place, experts, survivors, you name it, is that the narrative of the victim and the villain as being what the narcissistic relationship is, it's just too simple. I mean, really, short of it being a serial killer meeting a saint, it's not just that. Is there some kind of in between? Yeah, there is. People think like, well, I do feel like this person abused me and pulled a fast one on me. It's not as simple as that you were Little Red Riding Hood and the other person is the wolf. I personally believe that such a simple model does kind of devalue the other person in the narcissistic relationship and makes the non-narcissistic person seem more passive than they really are. So let's just start with some basic parameters, okay? I hate the word victim because to me it really does imply a passivity that is not the case with many people in narcissistic relationships. The fact is that most people don't understand narcissism, and that's the biggest problem. The world enables narcissistic patterns. People get indoctrinated into the cognitive dissonance of it all. It's a process. Getting played by a narcissist is a process all of us are vulnerable to. People don't get into narcissistic relationships because they are foolish. All of us are vulnerable to this, and society actually really encourages narcissistic relationships. My goal is fourfold in this work. First, to educate everyone about narcissistic patterns in relationships, how rigid they are, the harm they can do. Second, is I want to help people who are trying to heal from and survive these relationships. Third is I want to teach people how to not get into these relationships in the first place. And fourth, I really want to stop the narrative out there that keeps blaming the people who are experiencing narcissistically abusive relationships and teach people to stop trying to find the sunshine and the good parts of these relationships and trying to turn the narcissistic folks into heroes. Enough with that. If I hear one more writer or journalist or actor trying to find the humanity of the grifter or the serial killer or the narcissistic person they are playing or writing about, I am going to throw up. Enough. So I want to tread lightly here because I do agree that making this about a bad person and a good person in a relationship, it is too simple. And people are actually going to feel that if we make it that simple, then they won't learn what they need to learn for future relationships. It wasn't just as simple as, I'm a good person and a bad person came along, right? When we make it this simple, people just feel like they were mugged for walking down the wrong street at night, rather than really understanding the subtle vulnerabilities, the societal pressures, and how these narcissistic patterns work. I once said and wrote that gaslighting is the pathologically insecure preying on the conventionally insecure. I think that applies overall to narcissistic relationships as well. The pathological insecurity of the narcissistic person means that they use relationships for regulation. Their anxious attachments mean that they're sort of interpersonally clumsy. Even though they look charming, they're clumsy. It's heavy love bombing. They flip from rage to intense interest. They flip out when people start leaving them. They hoover people to get them back. And then they neglect them once they have them back, right? There's constant manipulation because for narcissistic folks, their relationships are about gamesmanship. The entire relationship is a manipulative, neurotic shit show. The narcissistic relationship works for a few reasons on the healthy or the non-narcissistic person's side, okay, as it were. There are some key ingredients or steps that often make a narcissistic relationship happen. Most pointedly, cognitive dissonance, that idea of all the pieces have to fit, and justification, getting stuck in a narrative, practical connections like sharing a home, enablers, the, oh, it's just one time, they're having a bad day, the, ugh, but we live together and I can't afford to move, the, but my family or friends like them, the, but we look so good together. If you do not understand narcissism, then there is the power of future faking and the belief that people can change. Yeah, maybe some people can, but people with rigid personality styles like narcissism, not so much. There's no evidence to really support that. The narcissistic person's behavior is bad. That is for sure, right? And then it comes down to how much bad behavior do we ever need to witness before we walk? For some people, that answer is a lifetime. For others, it is, I want to walk, I really do, but it's too dangerous. In the danger stories, that villain-victim simple story tends to ring more true. But in other stories, the good day, bad day, cognitively dissonant, future fake, I can convince myself this is good because we look together, at least I have a family, we have great conversations mentality, I like the sex, he's a good cook kind of thing. That's what keeps people in the game. The subtle stuff, right? The painful line I have to tread is that people need to understand the never-ending manipulative nonsense that is a narcissist and a narcissistic relationship. But we must also understand our personal narratives and how they've gotten distorted over the course of our lives. Our need to work stuff through, and part of that, sadly, is sometimes playing out toxic scripts and having to witness the toxic stuff repeatedly. And over time, the more we're exposed to narcissistic relationships, the more we gaslight ourselves and future fake ourselves. All narcissistic relationships are a form of indoctrination. However, I also know that many people know that their relationships were messed up, but didn't know that these patterns, these messed up patterns, were actually consistent with narcissism, and most importantly, that narcissism really doesn't change. Once people got a handle on that, then they became more decisive. This isn't just a passive victim saying, I don't know what to do. People know what to do. They just need a roadmap. Now, there's a continuum of these narcissistic relationships, ranging from the lower end, such as sort of the annoyance of an immature, stunted person who is oppositional and tantrums when they don't get their way, or when you ask them to do something, all the way to the severe end of the continuum, where it's somebody who's more dangerous, coercive, manipulative, and threatening. The more dangerous, the more black and white, the more victim-villain it really all is. But I do agree, if we oversimplify this into bad versus good, villain versus victim, it just gives the enablers more to fight back with, to criticize with, to say, well, there are two sides to the story, blah, blah, blah. There aren't two sides. Abuse is inexcusable, but it is more complicated than good versus evil, dark versus light. It's about an insecure, manipulative person playing on some of our own insecurities and vulnerabilities. It's about us getting out of our own way, valuing ourselves, and recognizing our own narratives. It's about recognizing that we are not 6 years old anymore and wishing for our parent to be different. Because in many cases, as adults, we have a little more agency, though we do still carry those childhood wounds. It's so important that all of you get empowered with this information so we don't view ourselves as passive players in these relationships. We were passive players as kids. In most cases, we are not as adults, but please know that I fully understand that there are some narcissistic relationships where it's too dangerous to leave or too precarious. As always, in the video notes, we have those resources for domestic violence resources. Another piece that complicates all of this is the systems that don't get it. They want to see the two parties in a narcissistic relationship as the same, and that's simply not true. One of the chess players in the game is cheating. It's not a fair game. But if dealing with family court or civil courts or law enforcement or HR departments, you will see that there is another set of people who are manipulating and abusing as well. These are the systems that tend to blame the person who's being abused and will ask stupid questions like, why didn't you leave? Or why didn't you quit? Or what did you say to them to get them so worked up? And what was your role in this? That kind of nonsense can also make all of this feel worse because, in essence, you are being treated as being as much of a problem as the narcissistic person who is the cause of the issues and doing the manipulation. But the absolutely delicate balancing act is to find the place where we don't blame ourselves. We recognize that narcissistic behavior is unacceptable, but we also get out of our own way and call ourselves out on our narratives, our cognitive dissonance, our justifications, all of this while armed with the necessary radical acceptance that this situation with the narcissistic person is simply not going to change. By doing this, we are less likely to be defeatist about ourselves or to feel helpless. By elevating it past a victim-villain narrative into, I have some things in me I can address, and in most cases, not all, and recognizing that systems may not support you, but you can have a better offense in addition to a decent defense. We can finally recognize once and for all that the narcissistic person needs us more than we need the narcissist. Healthy people don't need supply. We can address our own attachment stuff more appropriately. We have the ability to manage our core wounds. Folks with these personality styles don't. Remember, narcissistic people need healthy people more than healthy people need narcissists. When you remember that, you take your power back. The story is more nuanced, and in that nuance is where lies your power. The strange issue is that many people say, well, Dr. Ramani, I don't like how you talk about narcissists because you're making it an us and them. It's like we're just dismissing an entire group of people. I ain't dismissing anyone. Really have to say that if anyone, any personality style wants to put their head down and do the daily work, I'll be right there at their side. But I will not tolerate if somebody feels like, yeah, I'm going to manipulate you today because I'm having a bad day. Figure out a way to work on that bad day. So it's not an us versus them. And if there is an us versus them, then the them becomes people who are not willing to regulate, who are not willing to keep it together, who are not willing to engage in very basic human things like compassion and empathy. If that's in them, then okay, call it that. So yep, I mean, I will keep taking the bullets on this one because that's just what it's been. People are not comfortable with this discourse, and I understand it. But what I'm not comfortable with is watching how many people have been shattered by these relationships. And when they're finally given the roadmap, the sense of, yep, this is a pattern. Yep, this is how it goes. Yeah, sure, this is why they're doing it. But above all else, that roadmap isn't just about the narcissist. That roadmap is also one that we need for ourselves to figure out where in our lives we learned that it was okay for people to devalue us. We get those messages from so many places, from society, from our families, but wherever we got them, it's not okay for people to devalue you. And just that one small lesson could probably be our best narcissist fighting tool of all. Thank you.